I bought this airplane in 2001. It had a fresh factory remanufactured engine on it. This one happens to have a Lycoming engine in it, and Lycoming recommends for these engines 2,000 hours between overhauls. Now that depends on how much the engine's used. I think there's also a timeline on it where they recommend overhauls. I think it's 7 years. Anyway, I've run this engine out once and had it overhauled, field overhauled. My mechanic overhauled it in his shop. And I've run it out again another 2,000 hours since then. So it's time for another overhaul. And there's 4 types of engines, I guess you might say. There's a used engine, and then there's the overhauled engines, and that's where they're overhauled, and they're overhauled to overhaul specs. Then there's a factory reman, and that's where all the parts are put back together. They can be used parts, but they have to meet new specs. And then of course there's a factory new engine. Well, the difference in price between the engines is pretty significant. Well, getting a factory new engine would about $75,000, $80,000, and I could get the factory reman engine for $40,000. So anyway, it's more cost effective to get that. It has the same warranty and everything and the same life expectancy on it. And I could have had this engine field overhauled again, but there comes a point in time when the wear and tear on the internal parts makes it so you have to replace a lot of things like camshaft or the crankshaft, rods, things like that. And it gets to the point where the price of those individually to replace them exceeds the price of exchanging the engine for a factory engine. And that's kind of what I figured on this one. This engine will have 4,000 hours on it. But anyway, like I said, it's coming up on time to get a fresh engine on here. So last summer in August, I ordered a new engine, a factory reman engine. Well, when I ordered the engine, they told me it was going to be 6 to 8 weeks to get it. It might be a little longer because they were having supply issues and stuff like that. I wasn't really too worried about it because I don't fly the airplane in the wintertime. I had enough hours left on the engine to finish out my season, and then I put the airplane away for the winter, so it doesn't really need anything then. It was so cold out here and so much snow that I really didn't have time to fool with it anyway. But it started coming around the middle of January. They still didn't have my engine ready. Well, I wound up calling in the middle of February, towards the end of February, to see where it was at. And they said it still hadn't hit the factory floor. I'd be noticed 2 weeks prior to when it went on the assembly line and whatnot. And I kind of got a little upset about that. Chewed the guy out, the broker out, and said that's unacceptable. It's his job to make sure I get my engine. I've already paid a deposit on it and everything. It's going to cost me revenue money for not being able to fly. And anyway, I got a little upset with the guy. And he said there was nothing he could do. I said, well, that's nonsense. You can call the factory and tell them I need that engine. It's gone from sublime to ridiculous 7 months instead of 6 to 8 weeks. Well, anyway, I guess that did some good because a week later I got a notification that the engine was on the assembly line, and they said normally it takes 2 weeks on the assembly line, but then the next week they called me and said it was ready and it was going to be shipped. Didn't know how long it was going to take for them to get it shipped. We got notified it got shipped and watched it come across country on FedEx, and I had it shipped to Seattle to the Alaska Marine Lines, which is the barge company there that ships up here. And they called me the other day and said it was there in Seattle, and the FedEx had dropped it off and there was no instructions with it except my name on it. So that was pretty ridiculous. But anyway, fortunately they know me down there, and we got it sent on the barge. Well, I come and picked it up yesterday and we got it home. I would like to say I got it home between rain showers, but it actually got a couple rain showers bringing it home, but it wasn't too bad. It didn't get soaked or anything. We got it in here in the hangar before it got soaked, which was good. Well, I had a whole bunch of stuff that we shipped south, or shipped north from when we were down south. I've got that grizzly planer there, plus I got a bunch of house wrap that a friend of ours gave us that we brought up, and it was all stacked up in here. Well, I had to move that stuff around and move a few other things around to make room for this engine in here. But we got that done, got everything moved, and got the engine picked up yesterday afternoon just before closing time at AML. And it was a good thing too, because like I said, it was raining a little bit yesterday, off and on, a few showers, nothing too bad. But today it's pouring down rain out there. So anyway, we got it in here and closed in, and here it is. And I think, generally speaking, unboxings are kind of boring and kind of useless, but I think I'm going to do an unboxing on this because I'm kind of excited about having it. And I know that there's a lot of people that want to see what it looks like, or there's not a lot of people. I don't have a lot of people watch my videos anyway, but there's probably 2 or 3 of them that might want to see what it looks like. So anyway, here it is. This is the crate. And says right there, Lycoming, and from Air Power, 0360 C4P. And that's just what I ordered. Now the box is 43 inches by 36 inches by 30 inches high, not including the pallet. And it weighs 383 pounds. Now it's a cardboard box on the outside, and it's stapled down to the pallet, so it just like a sheath over the top of the engine, and it's strapped down with plastic straps. They have a indicator on here that if it tips, it's not supposed to tip, and they got a tip indicator on here, which is a pretty clever little device. It's got some beads in here in the bottom in these legs and a triangle up here, and so if it tips, then you wind up getting beads up in there in the triangle. And I know there's some things that also have shock deals where if you get too much of a shock on them, they'll have some kind of indicator on them, but this one just has that tip indicator on it. So anyway, it didn't tip, so I'll go ahead and cut those straps, pop those staples out of the bottom down there, and see if we can't get that box off of there. Open that engine up and check it out, make sure it's in there. Well, I got the staples out of the bottom of that cardboard there on that. Hopefully that's all the ones that are on there. Judy, you can help me pick that cardboard up off of there. So now we'll lift that off. It's got other more staples in it, but I think it's just framework inside the box to hold it together. Side. Oh, you got it.
I didn't lift it, just lift it up. Just a second, put my hand underneath.
Roger.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Look at that. Ain't that pretty?
It's made just as...
Well, there it is. Looking pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and go over it, pull the paperwork off of it, take that in the house so it doesn't get all damp. It should have a logbook with it. And of course, it's got yellow tags on it and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, there it is. That looks good. Now it says it's been pickled. It's from the factory. They put preservative oil in it that's supposed to keep it from rusting and stuff. And they said if for some reason it gets turned or something, then you have to redo it. But now that's a 0360 C4P, so that's a horizontally opposed engine, meaning that the cylinders are opposite each other on both sides of the crankcase instead of being like a V engine or a straight inline engine or something like that. A radial engine would have them all the way around in a circle. That's a horizontally opposed engine. Now I think there's almost 100 versions of this engine of different styles. This is the O, means it's horizontally opposed, and it's a straight carbureted engine. IO would be a fuel injected engine, and TIO would be a turbo, or TSIO, turbo supercharged fuel injected engine. And then there are HOs with H designation on it, means it's for a helicopter. And then there's LO, which means it's a left-hand turning instead of a right-hand turning. The 360 means it's 360 cubic inches, which I suppose that each cylinder then is 90 cubic inches. I'm not sure exactly what the C means. There's A engines, and then there's a B, C, D, E, F, R's. There's all kinds of different engines. They depend on a bunch of different things, different crankshafts and different cams. I suppose there's a different number of teeth on the starter ring gear, and there's different mounts for it. This one happens to have conical mounts, which uses a little cone, 2 little cones on the back of it. They're the bolt that bolts onto the engine mount. There's dynafocal mounts, and they mount a little differently, and they have more shock absorption to them. Don't transmit as much of the engine vibration into the airframe as the conical mounts. Then there's differences back on the accessory case depending on what kind of different accessories you have on here. We don't have a whole lot of accessories on this one. Let's go take a closer look at it. Up front, of course, is the ring gear. I think this is a 149 tooth gear. I'm not sure. I remember for sure. I don't always remember all the specifics. That thing just slides over the crank into the crankshaft here. Now it's a solid crankshaft. A lot of crankshafts, or some crankshafts, are hollow, so oil comes through them and goes into the propeller to adjust the propeller. The oil pressure is what adjusts the propeller. They have a governor on them, and that adjusts the oil pressure going to the propeller when it's adjustable and can move the blades back and forth. This one is a fixed pitch propeller, so it's a solid crankshaft. And then, like I said, you got the bolts here for the propeller to fit right on there. And then there are timing marks. See, there's a top center, top dead center, and here's 20, 25, 23, 25. I think this engine times at 25. I don't remember for sure, but it's on the engine data plate. So we got a nice piece of steel there that it's bolted to, and straps, nylon straps to hold it down, screwed down there. So the old engine goes right back in the same case as this one to get shipped back to them. Got new spark plugs in there. They're just massive plugs and not iridium plugs. Oh, here's the mounts here. You got rubber cones that go in here on both sides, and then this goes up against a pad on the engine mount with a bolt through it, and that's all that holds it on. There's 4 bolts, pads here. Oh, there's the carburetor there in a box by itself. Okay, these are the Magnetos, and it does have, I ordered it with dual impulse coupling Magnetos because we modified the other engine to dual impulse couplings. What the impulse couplings do, normally Magnetos are timed for like 23 to 24 degrees before top dead center to fire, but to start it, the impulse couplings change the timing, internal timing, when the engine is RPMs are low, like when you're trying to start it. So it changes it to 0 top dead center to make it easier to start. Well, when you're in the field and one of your Magnetos goes bad, and it happens to be with the impulse coupling, you can't get the engine started for love nor money. And I've had that happen before, where I had to leave the engine or the airplane sitting out on a lake for a couple days while I called for an emergency ride into town and get a Magneto and get somebody to take me back out there and change the Magneto sitting on floats out in the middle of a lake. That's not exactly fun. So anyway, we modified the other engine to have dual impulse Magnetos so we can get it started if we need to. And that also, if you have to hand prop it or something, it makes it easier to start it with your hand propping it. So this is the oil screen. That's going to come off because I have an oil filter put on my engine. The oil temperature gauge goes in here, and then these ports right here go to the oil cooler. And then we have pads down here for a fuel pump and for this one might be for the vacuum pump, I don't know. And then you got something else down here. I don't know what they're for exactly. I don't have those parts on my engine. I keep it as simple as possible. We got nice new wiring harnesses on the Magnetos, the spark plug cables. And there's where the dipstick goes in there. I wonder where that's at. So we've got cylinder baffles down in the bottom between the cylinders. Those are all installed. And then we have to put the regular baffles for the airplane on. And these are drains for excess oil. Oil comes through the push job tubes and comes into the rocker box cover and lubricates that end, and then the excess oil goes out here and runs back down in the crank case. And then these are the intake tubes here that supply the air fuel mixture up into the cylinders. So those are 4 cylinders, and they're individual cylinders, each one mounted to the engine. That's number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. Continental numbers, those just the different opposite. Well, there it is, all together. I don't see any damage to it or anything. Oh, here's the dipstick tube. I was wondering where it was at. Okay, that's good. That's good. Oh, so I'll take this paperwork off, take it in, and then when we get ready to, we'll have to pull the other engine off, put it aside, and then we'll pick this one up and set it on there. So there's other pieces that go on. Of course, it didn't come. The starter mounts right here. This is a pad here for the starter. So I'll have to take the starter off the other engine and mount it on that. And then the alternator mounts over here on this side. Well, there it is.